Welcome back, or welcome to the Rebel Tech Podcast, where we discuss all the promises and perils of AI and emerging technology. I'm your co-host today, David Dunware, Campaign Director for Better Tech for Tomorrow, joined by my partner in crime, Zach Whiting. This is now 3 podcasts in a row where we've co-hosted, so our synergy, our mojo is back.
We're on a roll.
That's right. and despite it being session, we're still making time to have the important discussions that are really going to guide a lot of what's happening legislatively. And so to that point, we're honored to have on the podcast today a good friend, a good ally who fights in the trenches alongside us, Steve Kinard. Steve, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, David, and Zach. Thank you, TPPF. And likewise, I greatly appreciate the work y'all done. The report you put out on AI that we're going to talk about a little bit today, I think was a really good starting point to kind of level set as Texas looks at this issue. And what a time to be alive.
Right.
What a great time to be a Texan, by the way.
That's right. That's right. And what a great time to be in tech policy, where our job security is guaranteed for
through the roof
forever.
right now.
I know. Well, so I know for a lot of folks who are tuning in from our Capital community, you know, you're a household name in TexAlleged. Folks know who you are. But for some of our other folks and listeners, just take some time to talk about who you are, you know, what your intersection between technology and policy is, and take it where you want from there.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad to have what I think is a little bit of a unique story in terms of path that ended up getting me here. I'm a proud born and raised native Texan, but was never really overly politically involved. I was an oil and gas professional, focused on finance there, on working in a private equity-backed company, and then also on the banking side in oil and gas. And I greatly enjoyed that. And today I still work in oil and gas investments, and that's near and dear to my heart. But in 2020, I started to go down this rabbit hole, frankly, of high-performance computing in the oil field, and particularly at that time, Bitcoin mining that was monetizing stranded energy assets, natural gas, that didn't have a market. And in my background in oil and gas, we'd had that problem before, where you're a 99% oil revenue company. You got a little tiny gas stream, but it's like 50% of your time trying to figure out what to do with that gas. And I said, I don't know anything about high-performance computing, really, but I'm very interested in that, and that pulled me into the technology side, and then I continued to go down that philosophically and said there's this really important, I think, first principles discussion in America around how do we approach technology development, an industry that has been historically, frankly, leftist, progressive, working alongside the government to centralize control, I think. And in the past couple of years, we've seen this big emergence of kind of a new frontier for what tech development and policy looks like in the United States. I started working in the Texas Blockchain Council, so I kind of pivoted from a private industry focus to legislative advocacy that way. And I love doing that. We started as like the weird Bitcoin guys that everyone was like, what is this for real? Right. You know, now it feels like it's mainstream, and that just tells you how fast things can change. Right. And, you know, through that, I started to lean into it and really, developed a heart for the political process, and ended up running for office in Collin County, which was a wild ride. I'm glad I did it. We met a lot of people. I think we brought a different kind of message and engagement to that process than maybe the typical candidate, and came pretty close in the general election. And so that kind of continued to build the network. From there, and through the work with the Texas Blockchain Council, I developed a number of contacts that recognized that AI was kind of a new frontier in tech policy and in investment. And a missing piece of that discussion was a perspective of acting from first principles of pro-open source, pro-free speech, and frankly, pro-disruption of the status quo. Often that's good, sometimes it's bad, but ultimately, that's the way that America, I think, has won in every other industry, is allowing disruptive ideas to perform in the marketplace. That's the central ethos of the AI Innovation Association, which is the nonprofit association I'm the president of. And people can go to innovationconnect.ai, and learn more about that association there and the movement that we're trying to build through that. And, you know, when I first had that idea come to the forefront, I'll be honest, I said, no, you know, I'm busy. I've got a lot going on. And this was maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And then we went through a remarkable, I think, evolution of AI taking this hyperbolic climb as like buzzword of the year for 2024. And now I think is transitioning into actually being deployed in enterprises, actually seeing policy come through. And we see in the new administration, it's a core kind of issue
Right.
that they're identifying as this is not marginal to the American future. This is it. And that's why I'm just so excited to be a part of it.
Yeah. No, amen. And I want to emphasize for folks listening, I think it was almost exactly a year ago. We were at Texas Policy Summit. We met with you, Lee Bratcher, a couple others.
Yeah.
And while you were running, you made it very clear that you wanted technology to be a plank of kind of your platform and advocacy. And I remember we were looking over a resolution kind of promoting this idea and lauding this idea of open source systems.
Yeah.
And so I want to commend you because you were seeing these issues before. I think there's maybe one or two other folks in the legislature. You know, you have Chair Giovanni Capriglione and a couple others. But you really stepped into that. And I think that's a defining feature of kind of what makes your unique or your advocacy unique. And you know, with Zach, we were talking beforehand about, you know, your time running for Senate and in the Senate. And sometimes when you're pushing those issues that maybe there isn't the awareness, there's a big courageous swing that you have to take because it may not land. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that too, or questions on that front.
You know, this particular policy might upset some of the viewers, but I texted one of my colleagues today as I had another colleague from Eastern Iowa that ran the hands-free device bill. This was, you know, this was 7 years ago.
Right.
And so he introduced that. I would run it, and it got nowhere. And now these sort of things come to the fore. And kind of, you know, pivoting right off of what David said, just for a second, if we could kind of drill down on, you know, your decision to run for office and what that was just generally. I remember when we met, it was at a Dallas Young Professionals event. I think it was like at Maggiano's or something like that.
Yeah, with our friend Tan Parker.
Yeah, with Senator Parker. And I remember meeting you, and I've said this. I don't know that this is like, you know, sort of empirically correct, but I've always argued that young people are the most underrepresented demographic in electoral politics. And so when I met you and some of our other folks that have run for office and now serve in the legislature, I think that perspective is so valuable. So there's that kind of twofold thing. If there's anything you want to add into that conversation, it's the perspective that we bring as a young, hungry, idealistic, person. But then it's that other point you said is you brought in that unique perspective that you had from your past. So if you could just talk about just, you know, any lessons that you learn, any advice that you would have for people that are thinking about doing it. Because I usually say to people, if you want to do it, do it. But buckle up because it's gonna be a ride. But just any thoughts you have on?
Look, I agree with the buckle up. It will be harder than whatever you think it is. But, you know, I'm an entrepreneur by default. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur, so I guess it's in the blood. And I will say that running a political campaign is probably the most entrepreneurial thing that you can do. It is a unique kind of experience in that you've got this hard date out in front of you and it's a binary outcome. There's no pivot after that or whatever. It's just win, lose. You have to have a bit of that entrepreneurial mindset. And what I would say for me, because it's near and dear to my heart, and I'm still working to try to recruit younger people to get involved in the political process. And in an age where the cost of communications is going down to zero, I think we are going to see more and more entrepreneurial people step up and realize that the mindset that the government doesn't affect me and I'm going to go off and build, it has failed America. I think that's a central part of the mandate that we saw in this last election. And leading up to that, that's what I felt calling me. If I can put it kind of bluntly, I felt like I can't complain unless I'm in the arena.
That's right.
That's what I felt like. And I was going around talking to different people. Hey, this is what I think about this issue, and we should be doing that. And if you do that enough, people will start to say, why don't you do that? And I didn't really have a good way to articulate why one shouldn't, particularly with a state house seat. You know, we're the 8th largest economy in the world. The legislature here has an unbelievable influence, I think, on global affairs. But by the same token, state house race is still pretty hyper-local. We were massively outspent and still performed, I think, remarkably well, given that that landscape, and part of that was recruiting in a lot of the younger groups that helped me out a lot, and I still feel indebted to them for being a part of the campaign. And I'll tell you, one of the more interesting experiences I had, and talking about technology a little bit, was with a group of teenagers not old enough to vote that were interested to get involved in the political process, and I was encouraging them this way and letting them know that, you know, it's fairly unique that you can go to a public event, sit down and talk to a candidate for 30 minutes, an hour. That's hard to, U.S. Senate race, you know, it's just impossible. It's not something you can do. And so that's something that we tried to lean into, and they were attracted to and recognized that we want a pro-technology voice in the legislature. It's a winning issue. It's a way to recruit more younger people in, and I'm going to continue to try to carry the banner for that. And not relevant to the tech issue so much, but I will say probably the number one winning issue with those younger kids was, I said, everybody here agrees that the state testing regime has failed us. Right. It's a waste of time. It's unbelievably expensive. It's inefficient. If you believe that, if the teachers believe that, if your parents believe that, if all of us really are saying that, and this is a representative democracy, then what's going on here? Right. We have to disrupt that status quo. And I saw them kind of starting to shake their heads. And so hopefully we keep building that movement that you can make a difference. And if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, you know, step up. Right.
There is, I mean, something to be said about, like, absolutely entrepreneurism. I have never run. I'm the lone duck here. I'm the non, you know, I haven't ever run for anything aside from student government.
Yet.
But yet. This is part of the pitch. Yeah, I was going to say pitch me right now. No, Greg, please, I'm staying at TBPI for now. But there's something, you know, the first time I did block walking, it's you know, you're thinking quick on your feet. You got to be ready to go. When somebody opens that door, they may hate you, they may love you, they may be indifferent. And so your pitch is tailored specific to that person you're interacting with. Yeah. And so there's that entrepreneurism there. But then the grit, to your point, the buckling up of you're going to get doors slammed in your face. You're going to have, in your case, you know, a ton of money and misinformation that's thrown your way. So I think that's such a powerful message for young folks, because for me, it took one time block walking to realize, like, as a kid say, it can leave the group chat. You can actually go out and you can be a part of this and make a huge difference. Yeah. Like one block, one series of homes that you walk through could be the difference between a one election or not for a candidate. So I think that's a potent message that more folks need to hear.
Yeah, amen.
So, I mean, we'll probably bring it back to kind of your ventures toward the end, but we were chatting before the show. There's a lot that's happened in AI in the last week.
A lot.
You know, we're recording this just a week after some of the big announcements from the Trump administration, and we'll get into some of the EOs and all that. But the big news this week is DeepSeek in China, and are they besting us in AI? So I just want to start there. What's your analysis and thoughts on DeepSeek? What does this mean for AI in America and Texas?
I think I'd like to take a moment, maybe take a step back and lay out the landscape. I'm not sure how much of the viewership will be familiar with the gravity, I think, of what's happened. Over the past couple of years, I haven't had the time to go and add up, but it's many, many, many billions of dollars in investment have gone into building companies whose primary product is a large language model, and the largest and most notable of those is OpenAI with ChatGPT. And valuations have gone higher and higher and higher and higher. And it's kind of these heady times that I think harkens back to some of like the .com type stuff that you saw in the 1990s. And the name of the game has been that the amount of investment, dollars that go into building out compute, is directly correlated to your ability to win in the marketplace. I think that dynamic has been kind of universally accepted as like the truth, that then we all debate other issues on the foundation of that truth. Why is DeepSeek so important? Because this is a company with a very small amount of personnel as compared to the large American developers based in China, that worked in relative obscurity for some time, and then dropped a model 5 days ago, I think. And most remarkably, open sourced it, which you know means you develop this technology and basically make it available to everyone. I want to just share a quote from Mark Andreessen, who is, co-founder of A16Z, the largest venture capital fund in the United States. And that day he says DeepSeek R1, which is this open source large language model they shared, is one of the most amazing and impressive breakthroughs I've ever seen. And as open source, a profound gift to the world. And why do I want to share that? Because that's what it is, a profound gift to the world. Probably all of us at this table are not happy that it came from China, but that's not the primary takeaway here. It's a profound gift to the world. Why was it so remarkable? Because the inference cost, the cost to send queries to this model, are less than 5% the cost of the leading American models. It's a complete disruption. It's a rug pull, if you will, to that old narrative where the base was, if you don't have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 billion dollars, you can't even be in this game. Now, I'm going to cautiously invite some of the viewers and you to kind of put on a tinfoil hat for a moment.
My favorite.
And go down a
we have an actual one over here.
Okay, I may have to wear it because I'm going to go ahead and say I just don't buy that they trained this for whatever the number
6
is.
million.
The absurd.
Yes.
One thing is if it was like a couple billion, but to say it was a couple million, I just don't buy it. I don't have the evidence.
Sure.
I haven't been to China to see it. I just don't buy it. I think they did circumvent some of the restrictions that were in place for Chinese companies to buy the latest GPUs from NVIDIA and Taiwanese companies. So some investigation will take place there. Sure. But here's what's undeniable. And there was another tweet from Mark Andreessen just this morning, which I didn't write down because I didn't have time.
Sure.
But to paraphrase, he says, it really doesn't matter, this discussion of what did they spend, what did they not spend. Put your tinfoil hat on, take it off, whatever. Yeah. My opinion, as I've said, is that I don't buy it. But what is undeniable is that that inference cost has come down by that much. And that is astounding. Yeah. That is astounding. And the President Trump referred to it as a wake-up call and called for the country. And I think this is the quote of the week. We need to be laser focused on competing to win. That's right. So my encouragement to everyone watching, to every American, is let's be laser focused on competing to win. Because this is, some have characterized it as a Sputnik moment. It's a shot across the bow. There's no way that you can interact with this and say, what we're doing is okay. Let's keep going along. I mean, it is unsettling. Also a gift to the world. I will say this though, on the day it dropped, I couldn't help myself. I went and downloaded it. On that same day, the Senate published the school choice bill, which is an issue I think we're all interested in as well. And so that bill dropped, and I couldn't help myself. So I took it, I dropped it into DeepSeek, and I put it into XAI and the Llama and the ChatGPT and Claude. And the DeepSeek summary, I'm going to say, was 80% there. And so right away I said that is, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
However, it did miss a very important detail, which was to break down the different allotments that the bill makes in terms of the dollar amount that it gives for different parts of the program. And I'm highlighting that because I think that's really important, actually. Right. The other models did pick it up. And so sometimes somebody can tweet out, this is just as good as this other model. People say whatever. You got to get and work with it. And so right away, it gave me a little bit of pause of like, okay, is it really just as good? Because all of the other ones did pick that up. Okay. So we need to continue to see. Now, I went back and did a few more prompts in DeepSeek, and it gets better quick, and it'll break down the document. And so don't misunderstand me. At this point, I think if you're in the tech space, you are required to engage with that model. I mean, you just have to play around with it because it is that meaningful an advancement.
And I think too, the importance of, like, I mean, there's no country, no group of innovators that have done this better throughout the course of history, is the ability of American entrepreneurs and companies to pivot. Yeah. And this is one of those things where maybe, and apparently all we do is talk about Sam Altman on this. We talked about like 5 times in our last episode, but to his credit, he mentioned like, hey, this is whatever you want to call it, an exciting wake up call, or whatever his quote was, to have a real, sort of competitor, let's say. So taking a look at that sort of old model and pivoting, we see it in like, the aerospace industry. You have like companies like, Boeing and whoever in the world else, builds these, and they do this, and Elon Musk talks about this all the time, this cost plus model, putting hundreds of billions of dollars, and whether you do it or not, you still get that money versus show me the results. And so maybe that type of like hungry, edgy, entrepreneurism that we see come out of, primarily Silicon Valley, but elsewhere, hopefully, that'll take hold. And to the president's, admonition that we stay laser focused to win for the good of humanity.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence this dropped the first week of the administration.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't buy that either. That it just turned out that this is kind of when we. Come on now.
No.
So
you mentioned the Sputnik moment, and I think there's a cool corollary here to space and space, X and all the private sector companies for two reasons. One is if this is a shot across the bow, and it's now U.S. versus China. I was just listening to All In podcast this morning, and I'm blanking on the guest name, but he said, this is the new war. This is the new space race. And China just said, hey, we're getting pretty dang close to, orbiting and colonizing Mars. So giddy up, pony up, America. Let's see what you got. And that competition is what drove us to land on the moon. So that piece, in and of itself can be great for, that focus. The second, this is to a certain extent the kind of disruptive power that Elon brought to space, where he goes to Russia, he's going to buy the ICBMs, and they laugh him out of the room when he offers whatever 10 million for some of the old fuselages, and he's flying back on the plane with his tail between his legs, and then he on the back of the napkin famously realizes, I can build this myself for 1/15 the cost, and by the way, we can pursue a fully reusable rocket.
Right.
That changed everything in space. And if DeepSeek does this, let's say it's the first step in the next direction where we're heading with, economies of scale and growing and scaling these companies, then I say Trump's right. Let's focus on this being the big impetus for what's to come after this.
Yeah, I'm still bullish America. And I do think it's the wake up call we needed. As you allude, though, we'll see it in the results. And I see a shift here. And this isn't just me saying this. I know the executive team at Palantir has been beating this drum for some time, that a lot of the value and kind of the AI stack will move to applications built on top of LLMs. And I think that's a good thing. Another way to say that is instead of all the value being concentrated in 3 or 4 giant closed source models, there's a whole innovative layer on top. And open source wins. And I think that's the debate that we're going to have. It's fascinating to see the different approaches to this that are diametrically opposed between Mark Zuckerberg and Meta that have been open source from the beginning. And so there's this debate going on. And I think we're entering this phase where it's going to be less debate and kind of tweeting, and it's just the model costs this. And people are not going to pay $20 a month. Right. It's just, that's not what it's going to be going forward. So this is it's a tremendously fascinating time to be alive, and every day there's some new thing happening.
Well, and we'll just call it clickbait headline because I haven't actually read it yet, but I think Alibaba said today that they have a model that's even better or more powerful than DeepSeek. So buckle up. We joke about this, like every day I wake up and I'm like, why am I surprised by anything? And then I wake up and I'm surprised by everything.
Can I ask Steve, because you're an open source guy, if you're China and you're DeepSeek, why would they pursue an open source model? Just from economics, politics, why do you think they would push for that over closing it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because there's kind of 2 questions embedded in that. Why would China, the CCP, want to do something versus why would a group of entrepreneurs want to do something? This is the tension I suspect that we'll see playing out in the coming months, because I don't see a compelling story as to why the CCP would do that other than to subvert American industry. Because what we've seen in the aftermath of the DeepSeek kind of headlines is most perplexingly, frankly, NVIDIA stock has tanked. I haven't looked at it this morning, but it's lost billions in market cap. And I am a subscriber. I think I saw somebody describing this as Javon's paradox. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, wherein as a model gets more efficient, its overall usage actually goes up because people can iterate more on it.
Right.
In my personal life, I know that to be true because I run up against credits all the time for like text to video models because the compute is still really high for those. And it's like, if this got cheaper, I would use it 10x.
Right.
What's my point? There's an angle there for the CCP to say, if we open source everything, it's not unlike Mark Zuckerberg's business strategy, which I think has been aptly described as a scorched earth approach, where he's open sourcing that to kill his competitors because he has a platform, WhatsApp, Facebook, to have data collection and training long term. And if having an AI product makes that platform more attractive to users, that's his business model. Does that make sense? So then you've got that scorched earth approach, which I love to see because then you have an open source system. Okay, so that's the CCP. I don't really like that.
Right.
If we're just speculating on their angle to subvert American industry and create chaos in our capital markets, I don't like that. But I think over time that'll subside. For the entrepreneurs there, open source has been the winning approach. I think the internet is the biggest example to ultimately bring in the best ideas, let them rise to the top, and then innovate on top of these kind of base technologies. And there is no, I think, credible explanation that I've seen yet as to why this is different. Because at the end of the day, I can just put it this succinctly. If the base model you're building on depends on a closed group of people versus one that the whole world can view, do you bet on this subset group of people or the whole world? I don't think it's a trick question, right? And that's what we're seeing play out here. In a lot of applications, I think having closed source development is if not preferred, maybe prudent. You can think of defense, So I'm not an anarchist or anything like that, but I don't know how you can look at this and bet against the open source.
And I think one of the threads through here, it's almost like the sort of the democratization of technology is you have these different technologies like the open source things like the blockchain that can make it easier, more available to all, rather than being locked in some sort of system or structure that others do. So there's something good to say about that as well.
There really is. Where ChatGPT has excelled is the user interface is great. I mean, give them credit where credit is due.
Fantastic.
That's really good. But then you've got companies like Perplexity, not a member, don't pay me, but American company, and they were really quick to get DeepSeek up on their platform, and so it's multi-model, and you can drop down and pick one. Brave Browser is a company that we have collaborated with a bit, and similarly, you've got a list of open source models there that you can choose from, and so the user interface is getting better to democratize these tools. But that's friction. Because you get people, hey, you got to change browsers, you got to download this app. Oh, I don't want to do that.
So, E to a T.
And armchair quarterbacking here. My sister does UX UI, and so I've had kind of a window into when she's creating new interfaces or apps. It makes a huge difference. Like there's almost this. I mean, you look to social media companies, the dopamine they can produce based on how things are configured, the colors, the shapes, and all that. And so we are getting to a point where, as we have the scaling question under play, we have, again, is it open source? Is it closed? What is the kinds of data being trained? But the interface, that's going to be part of the game of who's going to win, who has the most aesthetically pleasing LLM Gen AI tool. And that's kind of the whole Threads versus Twitter fight too. It's a similar product, but X is more user friendly. And I will say, China historically, despite their attempts with Temu ads, I've written enough op-eds where I think they're targeting me specifically. Their UX UI just isn't where it is in America. So that's kind of a unique comparative advantage. And I'm curious how that plays into the whole adoption piece too, of which app will be the Google 90%, market domination to rule them all.
This is fantastic. Okay. Why don't we talk a little bit about sort of maybe the future of technology, the future of Texas, and kind of what you see on the horizon. So we've got a couple different things at play. Is the president has sort of said the golden age is here, and us being in Texas, sort of the Texas miracle being a thing that we have all the ingredients here. We have the people, we have a good degree of capital, the great economy, the great regulatory environment. So we have the tools here in Texas, and now there's this talk. Everything has to have a name now. So Stargate is the thing now, but this idea that we're going to invest hundreds of billions of dollars. What sort of role, just broad, big picture, do you see Texas having in this sort of next age of technological development?
I think there's two kind of poles in the country right now pulling on each other in terms of influence on technology development, and one's California and one's Texas. And that doesn't mean none of the other states are important, but those two states we're just bigger. We're just bigger and
better.
And
Texas.
better, thank you. And
don't knock on Boise, Idaho.
Okay.
So
capital.
Yes.
I haven't been there, so I'll put that on the list. And so, last year, California got out in front, if you will, and went down a path of a kind of centralized governing board that was almost like a permitting regime for AI, and most perplexingly had no carve-outs or any kind of recognition of the open source ecosystem, which just flat out didn't make sense. And interestingly passed the legislature and ended up being vetoed by Gavin Newsom, which might be the only thing he's ever done I agree with. And so that was that was just a really interesting kind of dress rehearsal for this broader debate. And so that failed. Now in Texas, what I think sets us apart is we have the energy, because the two things are inextricably aligned. And one of the actions that President Trump has taken that I think is really important for this AI debate is he's also declared a national energy emergency. I think that's what it is. It's an emergency. Back to the Sputnik moment of DeepSeek, we're in an emergency kind of mindset of it's time to accelerate, it's time to build, because that's how we're going to win. And in regimes that are focused on kind of centralized regulatory kind of burdens, you are not going to have a mindset of acceleration and building. And the energy just won't be there, because that's not an app that people can just download. That's like hard infrastructure that has to be built. We were discussing before we started here, I think one of the more promising announcements that I saw literally yesterday was from Chevron in a joint venture with GE, who's the largest manufacturer of gas turbine engines, to build out new energy generation co-located with data centers, which has been an issue that I've worked on for years now, of the co-location of data centers with energy infrastructure, because the two are right. And so I think we're starting to see the mainstreaming of the mindset that energy investment is AI investment and AI investment is energy investment. What better place than Texas for that kind of winning formula? To play itself out, in addition to in Abilene, where the Stargate project has announced kind of its first rollout, is the center where the future of small modular reactors for nuclear technology is being developed. I'm as pro oil and gas as you're going to get, but medium long term, we don't win this race without that piece of the puzzle. And I think it makes a lot of sense that they've gone to Abilene. I'm rooting for Project Stargate because I'm rooting for America. That's right. I remain skeptical. When you have a group that includes NVIDIA, Oracle, Microsoft, OpenAI, I don't know who else I'm missing in there. SoftBank. Okay, there's a number of egos there. It's difficult to put that all together. What does the underwriting process look like? But I'm rooting for it. But if I were a betting man, I would bet on Chevron to build out faster, and have the energy that is required to ultimately deliver on that promise. I'm hopeful that with this new mindset of we're playing to win now, we're going to have more and more of these kinds of joint ventures. And that marketplace of ideas is ultimately what will best dictate what kind of investment structure makes sense here. The large consortium model to me seems difficult. But Texas really should step up and lead this new charge of building. I think that should be our mantra here. We are building. Shovels in the ground.
Yes.
And I do expect that we have the spirit here, the resources, the personnel, all of that is in place to do that. And so I look forward to being a part of that and really trying to build this message more that let's think of the two, energy and AI, that the way we make this another American century is on that foundation. And Texas is the place where we can set that tone.
Yeah. I mean, beautifully said.
Yes.
And I think, I grew up in California, and so I think I'm entitled to, have a little more loathing and antipathy toward what's happened in this state. If I were to guess and let's take the tinfoil hat back for a second. When you have a governor and you have a legislature that's pushed for all electrification in vehicles, and then simultaneous and in concert with, hey, combustible engines are bad, you aren't allowed to own these vehicles anymore.
Ludicrous.
Within the same week, folks who are trying to charge their electric vehicles can't because there's brown and blackouts. California has an energy crisis that's already metastasized. It's already fully taken root. And so if you're Newsom, and let's say there is a modicum of intelligence through all that hair gel that he has going on there, then he's recognizing we don't have the energy for the electric vehicle grid. We sure as heck don't have it for residential, and we definitely don't have it for AI data center buildouts. No. And it's almost sad, as much as we love, we're the 8th largest economy in the world. They're going to be 7 probably next year. Those companies are flocking to Texas because they recognize there is no future, not just because there's this innovation and entrepreneurism screed that's happening. I mean, look at all the folks in Silicon Valley that were longtime Democrat voters who started not just using their platforms vocally to advocate for Trump, not just talking to Elon, but go down the pipeline. They put their money where their mouth was. Yeah. And I think I want to just emphasize that your point on on energy and the messaging there, that to me is going to be one of the big game changers. If we are going to be the golden age, we're going to build nuclear, natural gas, oil, you name it, all the above. We need that in order to win. And let's eat California's lunch.
Yeah. Amen to that. I mean, California is a beautiful place. It is sad to see. The Senator Scott Wiener, who carried the AI bill last time around, has refiled. So
I didn't realize that.
There's going to be another round there.
Yeah.
Now, the full language is not out yet. This happened, I don't know, a week ago. They're getting started just like we are.
Yeah.
And we're going to see it play out in parallel. New York has an AI bill around there's different terms: misinformation, discrimination, equity, of kind of a government mandate to dictate what is and isn't allowed. And so I think this is the right way. Federalism is the way the United States should work. Right. And states can show this is what we think. This is another way of doing this. And then have a deliberation, that way. Yeah. Now that the federal government has made this clear dictate that, we are not going to have random executive orders that has a bureaucrat in D.C. that just kind of makes a ruling from on high. And that opens up the opportunity for this leadership. I don't suspect that the approach from Scott Wiener in California will be materially different from last time around, because he hasn't shown any indication of wanting to hear different viewpoints.
That's a key. There's no collaboration that's happening at that front. Right. Yeah. Well, shifting gears, there's a lot happening with DOGE, both federally and now even at the state level. And so I want to give you a chance. We have Department of Government Efficiency, and now Elon, Vivek is going to do his thing running for governor. And so Elon's going to hopefully chop through the $36.4 trillion in the debt that we have at the national level. And then the Texas House in the recent rules package announced the creation of Delivery of Government Efficiency as a committee. So 2 unique vectors and avenues. And you can take this anywhere you want, but you have a unique, insight into this. If you see any low-hanging fruit where either of these channels can be real effective within the first let's say 180 days in Washington and this session in Texas? Take it where you want.
What a great question. I am encouraged and bullish on the Doge concept here in Texas. And I would characterize it as one of the best ways that Texas can take leadership of showing how government and AI overlap is to demonstrate best practices or opportunities within the government itself. In other words, not dictating in private industry, do this, don't do that, but rather here within the very substantial different enterprises that the government manages, we're going to look for ways. I am very curious how that committee is going to function and kind of what that transparency looks like. At the end of the day, here's the tension: is there's a lot of people employed in a structure that rewards the status quo, and that's difficult to move in a different direction. An opportunity I see, just because it's a pain point and it's in the headlines, is the wait times to get a new driver's license and basic document. I had to drive the next county over for a passport. It is kind of nutty.
Yeah.
And the automation of some of that, I think, is a clear, you're talking about low-hanging fruit.
Right.
Like debottleneck something that is totally not partisan.
Sure.
It's like, this is a basic government function. It's not getting done right now. How can we do better? I would give that some real thought if I were on that committee, and would love to see a bipartisan rallying around that. And I think it could be a feel-good moment for the legislature. Where I do want to take it is there's a lot of different bills in the legislature that touch upon this subject matter. And I've spent a fair amount of time, and so I've summarized a few things because I think it's interesting and it shows us, I think it gives some indication of where the mindset is. So I've counted 20 total bills that have something to do with artificial intelligence. Of those, 10, in some way, shape, or form, specifically address non-consensual images as they pertain to targeting minors, which is creating pornographic or inappropriate images of a child. And interestingly, in addition to that, there are 5 more bills that use the term deepfake. So now we just have kind of we have a process to work through and define what it is that we're talking about. Okay, so you got 15 bills total. You got 3 in the Senate, 12 in the House, 5 by Republicans, 10 by Democrats. What does that tell me? Something's going to pass on that. Now, there's other issues to talk about, but there is a broad coalition here around the deepfake issue itself, and then within that, particularly as it pertains to kids. And I agree with it wholeheartedly. So I highlight that because is this going to get contentious around AI regulation? I think unavoidably the answer is yes. But let's first identify areas that perhaps can be accelerated and where we can have a win. I'll highlight HB 1717, which is being carried by my friend Joanne Schaffner. And it is a short bill. That's always a good indication.
It is a point of efficiency.
It is easy to read and understand and just expands the language, not an entirely new law. I mean, child porn is already illegal in Texas. We need to just make sure that this is properly addressed. And it is an issue at the federal level that our Senator Ted Cruz has already taken up that mantle, particularly as it pertains to having that kind of content taken down from social media platforms. His Bill to Take It Down Act has passed out of the Senate unanimous. So again, I've shown, even here in Texas, we have bicameral interest, bipartisan interest, at the federal level, unanimous. I really hope that we can come together and accelerate this and get this done and say this is just not something that we're going to tolerate. What's important in this as well, and the methodology and Representative Schaffner's bill, is to target the criminal and the people that have this material and are circulating it. I think where we have to be really careful is going after the model developers and deployers themselves, because it's a slippery slope. And I think that's the tension that we're going to have to talk about here. And it goes back to Are we accelerating development, or guiding people more towards a compliance regime that could be misappropriated? Because just as we may think that a group here in Texas will be well positioned to dictate whether or not a model is generating content that we don't agree with, now you've got a Scott Wiener in California. And if that becomes the the model, I have some real concern there.
Sure.
So I think what Representative Schaffner has laid out there, I'm hopeful can start to garner some a groundswell around that and build on what's gone on federally.
Right.
Secondly, and this is back to the Doge thing, there are a number of bills already out there that deal broadly with the healthcare market. Now, I've got a libertarian piece of me at heart. I'm always, by default, in the position of what is the least the government can do. I do think healthcare is different here. It's an area that has long had protections through HIPAA around data. So there's nothing new in terms of government involvement of who owns this data, what are the outputs. With this kind of technology, there needs to be an evolution there. I don't have all of the answers, but I see already in bills being circulated that there's probably a different discussion to be had around that. And there is a Doge aspect to that, because man, if you ever go to get any kind of healthcare services, the amount of paperwork and stuff, so there is an opportunity there, not without potential downfalls around privacy concerns. But I'm hopeful that perhaps through that committee, perhaps through a council established through the larger bill being discussed, which we're going to get to in a minute, that we can have that in public, that discussion, because I'm hopeful that Texas can lead there, because it does seem like something needs to be done. The last thing I'm going to highlight is there's probably the most far-reaching bill that's making its way through Texas, is HB, I think it's 1709, which is Chairman Capriglione's bill, and a lot of work has gone into that. And I want to highlight what I think is great and we can be proud of as Texans. First, there's a clear exception there for open source development. And I commend Representative Capriglione for doing that, because other bills and approaches have nonsensically just lumped everything together. And it's almost universally among tech people you talk to, they're like, it just doesn't make sense. Sure. That's good. Second, there's also a treatment there for companies that qualify as a small business under SBA, which I think is 500 employees, so a pretty big company, that a regulatory or a reporting regime wouldn't bring them under that umbrella. I think that's good. That there's a recognition that an innovative landscape should be allowed to thrive. And third, there's a kind of a sandbox program in there that's been laid out where different innovative developers, and perhaps this would be an appropriate venue for the healthcare issue that is out there, can come in there and pursue some kind of relief from the reporting regime. So those are all good things. And the fourth thing I'll say is it establishes a council, an AI council, long-term from the legislature. And I think that just makes sense. We should have an ongoing group. This is a critical technology. That to me is a no-brainer category. Okay. What is challenging is when, where, and how there's a government mandate to determine what can and can't be developed in the private market and who can deploy a model. And I think that's where work and discussion remains to be had. From our perspective and from a pro-innovation perspective, and I think President Trump's mandate to win, I think we should err on the side of acceleration and welcoming innovators. And if there's a group within the government that's going to determine what is and isn't discrimination, I think there's a lot of reservations around that. And so that's the discussion I expect to continue to be had. I'm glad that we're doing it in Texas and it's not just one place. And so now we can continue to do this. My spirit in this isn't let's do nothing, take your hand off the wheel. And I don't think a whole lot of people are advocating for that. But we do need to be mindful of some striking similarities in the powers of government that are being advanced in a California, New York, versus what's being contemplated within this current bill. So that's a landscape here that I see, and hopefully the Doge can be a committee that steers that more towards the public domain, where the government is already obviously in control.
Right.
And then proceed extremely cautiously with roping in the broader private marketplace when we are in a very real, existential race with on the global stage.
Yeah. No, well said. Great analysis of kind of the three different buckets there. And I'll say kind of in retort is, we're working very closely with Representative Schaffner on House Bill 1717. And I want to, reify what you're saying, that sometimes it's those very simple, elegant fixes to existing code that provide clear rules of the road, which is industry even asked for that. If we're going to regulate, make it clear. But then secondarily, there's some horrible, raw, nasty stuff happening, and we can hit that directly at the core. And her bill does just that. So glad you're working with their office on it too. I know they're appreciative of your advocacy on that. And then bringing it back as we conclude this show. You're talking about the California versus Texas approach here. And I think what's clear from the mandate that's coming all the way from Governor Abbott, who's talking about data centers and energy and all that stuff. And then the new speaker and lieutenant governor, even though we had the Texan event, we were hoping to get a shout out for AI, but I know their office is very focused on an AI policy this session, that there is the will to make sure we do something right in Texas. So to your point, what starts here changes the entire landscape of other states and what they're passing with AI. And this is where having folks like you, who I know are going to be in the trenches, and we were kind of chatting beforehand. I'm like, what is your work-life balance going to be? You're basically going to be working overtime, doing your full-time job and advocating. And so, Steve, as we come to a close here, take one second to kind of highlight your social media. You mentioned your website, just to kind of have it all in one place. Feel free to let our folks know where they can find your work.
Yeah, thanks, David. We're at innovationconnect.ai. That's the AI Innovation Association website. You can, follow us there. The easiest way to reach out to me directly is frankly probably on LinkedIn messaging. I do post on X, but LinkedIn has proved to be better, and that's just my name, Steve Kinard there. And we're going to continue to have calls and highlight different innovative companies. And I think my closing thoughts that I would offer on this, on the broader concern that I suspect many people have of bad AI, Terminator AI, however you want to characterize this. I was at an event and a gentleman was talking about this. This was within a financial services perspective of looking at the cyber attacks and the fraud that they encounter. And the best tool to reduce that and address it was actually another AI model that could identify that. What's my point? Often the best solution to bad AI is not government AI. It's good private sector AI solutions. We have a company we do a lot of work with, Angel AI, which is actually based in California, operates throughout the United States. And this is a parting story I want to share because I think it's encouraging. It is appropriate to have concerns around discrimination in a system that's automated through artificial intelligence. It's appropriate. But the experience that they have shown is to build a product that automates mortgage underwriting, that allows it to be translated live to, 100 languages or something, and has in fact had the absolute opposite impact and overcome discrimination. Because businesses and people that maybe don't speak English first or just don't have a familiarity, the model is infinitely patient. Much more so than a individual person who may say, these people don't know how to deal with the financial system, I'll deal with somebody else. And that's a story I want to tell, is that let's be cautious to not fixate on the bad when in fact the AI tool itself is showing that people are getting mortgages and owning homes through an AI tool that is reducing that discrimination. And so those are the stories we want to tell and bring a positive message and hopefully be a good collaborator and moving us forward. And I encourage people to be a part of that. I want to hear from people. Go to innovationconnect.ai and join us and be a part of this.
Well, I agree fully. And, we were joking beforehand. We try and end on an optimistic question, but you gave an optimistic note. So I have nothing to add other than, Steve, thanks for your time, your efforts and advocacy, and looking forward to fighting the trenches with you on, we didn't even talk about crypto and all the other stuff, but all the fun stuff we're going to have this session.
We'll have to come back. Look, I enjoyed it. Thank you to both of y'all. And TPPF is really an important platform for this. And I'm just proud to be able to be an ally in that.
Bye.